how I rebuilt my life after cutting ties with my family who betrayed me. I never imagined my life would take such a sharp turn, but here I am. I'm Ethan, 25 years old, and I grew up in a tight-knit family, or at least, that's what I thought. I have a younger brother, Ryan, who's 24, and a sister, Haley, who's 22. We were all really close growing up, along with my parents, Jim and Laura, who are now in their early 50s. Holidays, weekends during college, you name it, I spent it with them. We lived in the suburbs of Minneapolis, and all three of us kids ended up going to the University of Minnesota. If someone had told me a year ago where I'd be today, I would have laughed and called them a pessimist. But, as it turns out, life had some brutal lessons in store for me. I met Kelly, who's 24, during my sophomore year of college. We hit it off and started dating. It was serious from the start, and after several years together, I proposed last December. She said yes, and we started planning a summer wedding. We had big dreams of building a life together in Minnesota. Everything seemed perfect until April. That's when my world completely crumbled. I came home early from work one day and found Ryan, my own brother, in bed with Kelly. The betrayal was like a punch to the gut. I couldn't even process it. I just left the apartment and told Kelly to get out. A few days later, Kelly came back to explain. She told me she had fallen in love with Ryan over the years, that she was sorry, but she wanted to be with him. The nerve of it all, I couldn't believe it. I kicked her out for good, blocked her number, and did the same to Ryan. At first, my family rallied around me. My parents even banned Ryan from family events, and for a while, I thought I could start to heal. But then life threw me a curveball I didn't see coming. In November, my boss approached me with a big opportunity. He said our Chicago office was struggling and needed someone reliable to take over. He recommended me to lead the charge. At first, I was hesitant. I never thought I'd leave Minnesota. But after everything that happened, I decided it was time for a fresh start. The plan was to move after Christmas, but I wanted to break the news to my family at Thanksgiving and enjoy one last holiday together. Unfortunately, Ryan and Kelly weren't done stabbing me in the back. When I arrived at my parents' house for Thanksgiving, I noticed a lot of cars in the driveway, typical for big family gatherings. I didn't think much of it. But when I walked through the door, there they were, Kelly and Ryan, chatting it up with my aunt like nothing had ever happened. I froze. My aunt called out to my mom, and Ryan and Kelly avoided making eye contact. My mom and dad came in, greeted me, and then asked me to sit in the living room. Reluctantly, I sat far away from Ryan and Kelly, but I couldn't ignore the fact that Haley and the rest of my family had positioned themselves closer to them. Then came the lecture. My mom started by saying how awful their actions were, but quickly shifted to talking about forgiveness and how she hated seeing the family torn apart. She wanted me to move forward and forgive them. Ryan and Kelly chimed in with half-hearted apologies, but I stopped them with a raised hand. I turned to Haley and asked if she agreed with all this. She looked at me, tears in her eyes, and nodded. Then I asked my dad. He gave a firm yes. I couldn't believe it. I was alone. My entire family had chosen them. I got up without a word and walked out. I heard a few people calling after me, but I didn't look back. I ended up at a McDonald's, eating one of the worst Thanksgiving meals of my life. But while I sat there, I made a decision. I was done with all of them. I had enough savings to stand on my own. They didn't know I was moving, and I wasn't about to tell them. I blocked them all: phone, social media, everything. My phone plan was under my parents' account, so I handed it in, got my own plan, and even paid double just to cut ties. I told my boss I wanted to move to Chicago early, and I worked with the landlord to secure my apartment by mid-December. On December 15th, I moved to Chicago, leaving Minnesota and my so-called family behind. A few friends knew about my move, and apparently, the news slipped. Last night, I got an Instagram DM from what was clearly my mom using a new account. She asked why I left without telling anyone and said the family missed me. She wanted me to come back for Christmas. I replied once. I told her she only had one son now and that I was no longer part of the family. Then I blocked her account and tightened my privacy settings. Now, I'm looking into changing my last name and completely starting fresh. I'm excited to see what Chicago has to offer because, honestly, anything is better than staying stuck in the mess they created. It's hard to believe Christmas is just around the corner again. This past year in Chicago has been nothing short of amazing. I'm 26 now, and I've had a terrific first year here. I met an incredible woman who's been a bright spot in my life, changed my last name, and, aside from one incident, successfully cut my family out of my life. That incident happened back in January. A few days after New Year's, I got a message from Jenny, one of my sister Haley's friends. She's 23, and she reached out saying she was moving to Chicago and needed help getting settled in. She also asked if I could show her around the city. Now, looking back, I should have seen through it. But Jenny is gorgeous, and let's just say I wasn't exactly thinking with my brain at the time. So, I agreed to help her. When I showed up at her new place, I immediately noticed my dad and my brother Ryan unloading a U-Haul. I froze for a moment, and before I could even react, my mom, who must have been watching for me, came outside and called out my name. It felt like everything came to a standstill. Everyone just stared at me. I rolled my eyes, turned around, and started walking away. That's when they all chased after me. Ryan and Kelly were in tears, saying they felt awful about what had happened and wanted to talk. As if tears could erase the betrayal. My dad, clearly frustrated, grabbed me by the shoulder to stop me. He turned me around and told me to quit being an ass. Something in me snapped. Without even thinking, I punched him square in the face and kept walking. I could hear the gasps around me, even from people on the street who had stopped to watch the scene unfold. My family shouted after me, telling me I'd gone too far, but I didn't care. I kept walking. Once I got on the L, I sent Jenny a message. I told her what she did was cruel and manipulative, and that she could find someone else to help her get settled. I didn't expect to hear from her again, but 2 days later, she surprised me with a long message. She apologized. She admitted that she'd only reached out to me as a favor for Haley, who had been desperate to fix things between me and the family. Jenny said she felt terrible and that, after seeing everything firsthand, she completely understood why I wanted nothing to do with them. She also filled me in on what happened after I left. Apparently, my dad and Haley still haven't truly forgiven Ryan and think my mom brought him back into the family way too soon. After I left, my dad and Ryan got into a nasty argument at Jenny's apartment, causing such a scene that she kicked them all out. Jenny then asked if we could meet for dinner so she could apologize in person. I wasn't planning to say yes, but something about her message made me rethink. Plus, let's be honest, Jenny is hard to say no to. We ended up meeting, and to my surprise, we hit it off. Like, really hit it off. One dinner turned into a string of dates, and now, nearly a year later, we're inseparable. This Christmas, I'm actually going back to Minnesota with Jenny so I can meet her family. She's already promised I won't have to deal with my sister or anyone from my family. She's completely cut Haley out of her life. That alone means the world to me. I'm even looking forward to reconnecting with some of my high school friends while I'm there. Here's hoping my family stays far, far away. Well, you all were right, I never should have gone back to Minnesota. Now I'm back in Chicago, single, heartbroken, and angrier than I've been in a long time. It all started out fine. Jenny's family seemed warm and welcoming. Her dad and I had a great conversation about Big Ten football, and her mom asked me lots of questions about my job, how Jenny was adjusting to Chicago, and if she was staying safe in the city. But looking back, something felt off. No one mentioned my family, not a word, which should have been my first red flag. Christmas Eve was nice. We had dinner, complete with some fettuccine alfredo that felt straight out of the holiday. Christmas morning was even better. I got some thoughtful gifts, and we spent the afternoon just relaxing. It felt like everything was going right for once. But then Christmas dinner came. When Jenny's mom set the table, I noticed there were 5 extra chairs. She casually mentioned that some family friends were coming over, and I didn't think much of it. That is, until the doorbell rang. And there they were. My parents, Haley, and the 2 people I've worked so hard to erase from my life, Ryan and Kelly, waltzed right in. Turns out, Christmas dinner was really an intervention, orchestrated by Jenny and her family to get me to reconcile with mine. They came in looking smug, like they'd already won. My mom launched into her speech, saying I needed to forgive them and move on. Sure, what they did was wrong, but she thought my actions, cutting them off, changing my last name, were completely unacceptable. Then my dad jumped in, telling me it was time to let it go. He said Ryan had done enough to earn their forgiveness and that I'd punished the family long enough. I should have just walked out. But I couldn't help myself. I looked at my dad and said, "What family is that?" He replied, "Your family." "No," I said, staring him down. "I'm not a part of any family. I've changed my last name. I feel nothing for any of you. You chose him over me." That spoke volumes. The room went silent, and then Kelly, of all people, piped up. "You changed your last name?" she asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. Everyone froze. I turned to her, feeling a bitter grin tug at my lips. "Yeah, I did. You're right, Kelly, I used to love my last name. It connected me to my favorite baseball manager. But you know what? Billy Martin would have changed his last name too if his family had been the kind of goons you all are." I stood up, turned to Jenny, and said, "Find your own way home. I'll grab my stuff later." And with that, I left. Everyone started yelling after me, but I didn't even turn around. I walked out the door, got in the rental car, and drove straight through the night back to Chicago. I pulled into my apartment parking lot at 3 a.m. and just sat there for a moment, trying to process it all. I have no idea how Jenny plans to get back to Chicago, but honestly, I don't care. She and her family betrayed me, and I'm done with them. On to the next day, I guess. Hey everyone. Long time, no update. I can't believe it's been 2 years since I last posted. Looking back, I was in such a dark place. Sometimes I wish I could go back and tell my past self how much better life would get. So, let me catch you all up. After that Christmas disaster, Jenny showed up at my apartment one night in late December, trying to apologize. She banged on my door and started shouting about how I was overreacting, which didn't sit well with my neighbors. Someone actually yelled at her to shut up. I finally opened the door, not to listen, but to hand her a box of the stuff she'd left at my place. That was the last time I saw her. She never returned any of my things, and I'm still bitter about losing my favorite hoodie. But hey, life goes on. A few weeks later, while I was out grocery shopping, I ran into Molly. She was 24 at the time and worked with Jenny. We'd briefly talked at their Christmas party, so I recognized her right away. Turns out, Molly had heard about the breakup and wasted no time asking me out for coffee. And when I say asking, I mean aggressively insisting. It was a little overwhelming at first, but I went along with it, and thank God I did. Coffee turned out to be exactly what I needed, because Molly turned out to be everything I'd been looking for. She was kind, smart, and funny, but most of all, she got me. I'll admit, I'm probably one of those guys who hates being single. Molly and I hit it off immediately, and we've been inseparable ever since. 2 years later, we're living together, and here's the big news: Molly's pregnant. We're absolutely over the moon about it. Was it planned? Not exactly, but we weren't exactly trying to stop it either. Which brings me to my current dilemma. My life is so much better now, and I've managed to keep my family out of it. Molly has been incredibly supportive of that decision. She even blocked all my relatives when I asked and has had zero contact with them. But of course, my mom somehow found out about the baby. A few weeks ago, she sent a box of my old baby stuff along with a letter asking to be part of the baby's life. I kept the baby clothes and toys, they were mine, after all, but I threw the letter away without even reading the whole thing. I figured that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Last week, my sister Haley showed up at my doorstep. Molly answered the door, and of course, she had no idea who this random, crying woman was. Before I could intervene, Molly, soft-hearted as she is, let Haley in. Haley said she missed me and wanted to talk. She told me that Ryan and Stacy got married last year but that she and our dad didn't attend the wedding. Apparently, my mom and dad are separated now, though not officially divorced. She also mentioned that Stacy recently found out she can't have kids, which felt like unnecessary information, to be honest. Haley said she wants to make amends and that she and my dad both regret how things went down. She's engaged now and insisted she won't invite my mom or Ryan to her wedding if it'll make me more comfortable. She also said my dad is willing to come to Chicago this weekend to talk, if I'm open to it. Molly and I talked about it later. She said she completely understands how hurt I am and knows my family crossed so many boundaries, but she gently suggested that maybe it's time to consider forgiving them. She made it clear she'd support me no matter what, though, and hasn't pushed me in any direction. I just don't know what to do. Growing up, my mom ran the household, and Ryan was always her favorite. My sister, on the other hand, has always been closer to our dad, so if she's trying to bridge the gap, I feel like he probably supports her. But can I trust them after everything? I'm torn. What do you all think? Is it worth giving them a chance, or should I keep the door closed for good? Any advice would be appreciated. It's time for my ex-wife's boyfriend to meet the kids. And I feel happy? Yeah, I think I'm happy. I'm nervous too. Nervous that they'll like him more than what feels comfortable to me. Nervous that my ex-wife and him might break up and the kids might take it hard not seeing him again. If I'm being really honest, I'm nervous they might think he's cooler than me. Especially while he's the new guy initially and might show them new experiences. I've been divorced for almost 5 years now. Neither of us has introduced a significant other to the kids, who are 6 and 7 now, so this is a first for both of us. Okay, but you're not really happy, right? When my ex-wife, always the great communicator, told me she was going to introduce him via a text message, mixed in with logistics about school that week, I was surprised. It took me a few minutes to process what I felt. Ultimately I felt slightly anxious, but I was more relieved than anything. That text message marked a new stage of our relationship. Other than Donald, the manipulative creep she left me for, and Teresa, who I met after my ex-wife left me, and tried to make her jealous of Teresa, neither of us has known anything about each other's love life. It's always been a delicate balancing act for me to juggle not being ashamed of dating, but not kicking the potential hornet's nest of my ex-wife's envy of me being in a relationship. I never knew the status of her dating life, so I didn't know how her finding out about my relationship might go. If she was with somebody, it probably wouldn't stir up many negative reactions, if any at all. But if she wasn't, it could be an issue that I had somebody and she didn't, or an insecurity, turned to comparisons, turned to judgment on her end. I know this may sound like I'm jumping to conclusions, but I was with her for over a decade and can read her like a book, more on this below. So I always kept any signs of a female hidden from my life and house when she came over with the kids. Now, my hope is we don't need to be ex-spouses with kids, we can be more like a big extended family who share kids. But time will tell. When she sent me the text message about her plans to introduce her boyfriend, I told her the truth. I thought it was funny because just that morning, my girlfriend and I were talking about the same subject, but both agreed that we were not ready yet. I asked my ex how long they had been dating and if there were plans to move in together soon and told her she didn't have to answer, but I was just asking because I think it's important to know for the kids since it was their first time meeting a significant other. She said they were not moving in anytime soon because of logistics with where he lives, his kids' school, and where our kids go to school. She also said they had been dating for 2 years and she was going to introduce him as a friend at first. I felt relieved to learn both those answers and told her. I mean this when I say I'm really happy for you, that you found somebody you're happy with and sounds like a good situation for everyone. It's also refreshing that we can talk openly about this stuff now and I think it will be good for our relationship. She never responded. I also felt validated that they have been together for 2 years for a different reason. 2 years ago, in the summer of 2022, I had started dating Julia who was also going through a divorce and we were talking about our exes. I told Julia. I'm pretty sure my ex-wife started dating somebody recently. Why? She changed the way she talks to me. Like if I talk to her about anything casual and not related to the kids when I see her, she looks at me like I'm bothering her or being weird for talking about anything other than the kids. It's what she does when she feels she doesn't have use for me and I saw it whenever she was cheating on me. 2 years later, it's good to know my barometer still works. Lying is so much easier. I'm a terrible liar and get a lot of anxiety whenever I attempt it. I loathe lying and especially make a point to never lie to my kids, even if it means I have to have a more difficult conversation, like when they ask questions like, could a robber come rob our house? My ex-wife has a different outlook on lying. Just last week, I dropped them off and she was cooking chicken and yelled, "Oh no." My youngest said, "What, is it burnt?" She didn't miss a beat and said no. Of course, it was burnt. It's a small lie and she wanted them to eat the chicken, which I understand, but even an explanation of just this part, but I'll remove that could have, one, told them the truth, and two, still resulted in them eating dinner. Since she planned on introducing her new man to kids as a friend at first, which I agreed with, the night we texted about them meeting, I offered one piece of advice. It's up to you, but if I can recommend one thing, it would be to be honest with them about this if they ask questions. They are at the age where they're talking about crushes and they might ask you if he's your boyfriend now that they're learning about these type of relationships. I think you're smart to introduce him as friend at first, but if I were you and they asked if he was my boyfriend, I would be honest so it doesn't ruin any trust when / if they find out later. I want you to know that I won't be upset if that happens because you said you'd introduce him as a friend or anything. Again, no response. Oh, well. But it's not in my control and it's not my place how she approaches her relationships or parenting. When she told me about them meeting, she said it wouldn't happen yet, but maybe in a few weeks. Then a couple days later, last week, she told me that they might meet him on Friday, but she wasn't sure yet. Then she didn't tell me either way if it was happening. All I knew that Friday was she decided to pick them up early. She was dressed up more than normal, and I wouldn't have been surprised if they were on their way to meet him. On Saturday night, she told me they met him. The lack of communicating, saying they wouldn't meet yet followed up with meeting that week, isn't really dishonesty. I think it's avoiding conversations that could result in stress. Maybe she was stressed that I would react negatively. Or she'd have to explain herself. Maybe she thought I'd push back. Maybe I just don't matter that much in decision making. Or maybe we just have different beliefs in how and how much to communicate. I guess that's another symptom of why we are divorced. The difference. The difference between 5 years ago and now is her affair and the divorce have taught me to be okay with the unknown and uncomfortable. To stop trying to control the information others give me and letting that information torment me with anxiety. Maybe they will move in this summer and have already started planning it and she won't tell me until the week before it happens. Either way, I can't control it, so why stress over it? I'll spend my energy on trying to keep up with the kids and make my own great memories with them as our little family of 3. And by the way, another major reason I'm happy about this new stage? I'm just grateful that the boyfriend being introduced into my kids' lives is not Donald.